the 24/7 online threat to keep young people safe from the hidden dangers of cybercrime. Welcome everyone to day 3 of our series of 5 webinars exploring issues around child crime. Today we are examining cybercrime and how we can protect our young people from the dangers that lurk 24/7. Do you know what the young members in your family are accessing on the internet? Do you know how easy it is for children to get involved in inappropriate online relationships and fall prey to adult stalkers? It can be a scary world, and this webinar does not hold back. But before I introduce our panel of speakers, I must remind you about the necessary housekeeping. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools you can use. All the tools are resizable and movable, so please feel free to move them around. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions for our speakers during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We will try to answer these in a panel session at the end of the presentations with Embrace Chief Exec Anne Campbell, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered latterly via email. Please know we do capture all questions and your feedback is really important to us. A copy of today's slide deck and additional help materials are available in the resource list. We encourage you to download any resources or links that you may find useful. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause problems. Webinars are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. The webinar is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or your headset are turned on and the volume is up so you can hear the presenters. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides are behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help Engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast and can be accessed using the same audience link that you used to access this session. Now, back to today. We've been fortunate to secure some leading specialists in their field for our webinars, and I hope you agree that today's keynote presenters very much fit that bill. First up is Susie Hargreaves, the CEO of the Internet Watch Foundation, who takes us on a fascinating, if chilling, look at how criminals target vulnerable young people on the internet. Susie's organisation is charged with removing unsuitable material from websites wherever in the world they originated. A fascinating insight. Then we'll hear from Dafydd Llewellyn, who is PCC of the largest area in Wales, Dyfed Paws. As a father of a young child, this subject is close to Dyfed's heart, and he gives us a personal as well as professional perspective. Finally, we hear from Katie Bourne, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, who speaks about the amazing youth programme called Reboot, which is reporting great outcomes for those involved. I'm sure you'll find these presentations interesting, and don't forget you can ask questions to be answered at the end of the webinar.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm Susie Hargreaves and I'm the Chief Executive of the Internet Watch Foundation. Before I tell you about the IWF and the shocking truth of child sexual abuse, let me just tell you about Anna. We see Anna between the ages of 7 and 11, and she's been groomed into taking part in sexual activities from a very young age with people who we think are her relatives. She's made to pose provocatively and take part in several sexual activities, often with 1 or 2 other children who could well be siblings. She's actually raped, and her treatment's degrading and extremely cruel. What you need to know is that we find images of Anna every single day, and we have to work hard to get those removed. So the IWF is a charity. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We're independent of government and law enforcement, but we work incredibly closely with them. And we're funded by the internet industry members and also by the European Commission. We're also members of INHO, which is the International Association of Hotlines. So we work internationally and across the world. And we're a partner in the UK Safer Internet Centre with our partners ChildNet International and Southwest Grid for Learning. And they provide awareness raising and training in schools and for teachers and pupils. And they also provide a helpline. So in terms of our industry members, we do have 155 members. And these are our members. Just to give you an example of the big companies that support us, you'll see all the big ones: Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, etc. So how do we do our work? Well, we take reports from the public, and then we also have the ability to proactively search for child sexual abuse images and videos. We build technology for good, so we work closely with industry to build crawlers which crawl out the internet for suspected child sexual abuse. We have a report management system. We use artificial intelligence. We use classifiers which try and identify child sexual abuse before our human analysts review and assess all the content. And we also develop services and data sets for the tech industry to keep us all safer. One of these is called the IWF hash list, which is a list of digital fingerprints of known images of child sexual abuse. And we use this to search for duplicates across the internet. The one that most people know about is the IWF URL list, which is a blocking list of live sexual abuse websites which goes out across the world. And we have various other services. And we also provide 40 countries who don't have their own hotline outside of the UK with a reporting portal for their citizens to report. So let me tell you about what we actually mean when we talk about child sexual abuse content. In 2019, we assessed a web page every 2 minutes, and every 4 minutes that web page showed a child being sexually abused. In 2019, we assessed 260,000 reports, and that was a 14% increase on 2018. And 132,730 web pages showed images and videos of children being sexually abused. Again, that was an increase on the previous year. And bear in mind that every single one of those web pages could have 1 or 100 or even thousands of images. And you'll know that we were actually taking actions on millions of images and videos last year. So this really is an enormous problem. The way we deal with the images in the UK is that we categorise them. And they're categorised A, B and C according to UK sentencing law. A being the very worst, B being bad content but not quite as bad, and C being the images that don't fall within categories A and B. And you can see there the type of content that we take action on in each of those categories. To give you an example of the scale of the content that we take down, you'll see there that in 2019, 20% was category A, 20% was category B, and 58% was category C. And that's really risen over recent years, and that's largely due to the increase in self-generated content, which I'll talk about in a moment. So who are the children that we see who have been sexually abused? So we're dealing with children under the age of 17. You'll see on each of these bar charts that the numbers go up every year, unfortunately. And that's the two reasons for that. This combination of us being better at finding that content and working with the internet industry to develop innovative technology to find the content, but it also is sadly a measure of the fact that there's more of this content available online. So the majority of the content that we remove is of girls. So in 2019, 92% of what we removed was girls. That doesn't mean that boys aren't also victims of child sexual abuse, but it really is predominantly an issue affecting girls. And then you also see the ages on the left-hand side, which shows you that the majority of the children are sort of within the 11 to 13 and the 7 to 10 age group as well. One of the really appalling issues is that the younger the child, the worse the level of abuse. So if you look at this chart, you'll see that whilst the actual numbers of 0 to 2 are not as high in terms of the numbers that we actually removed, the fact is that over the last 3 years, 65% of the content we've removed of children aged 0 to 2 was actually category A. So that means babies and toddlers are subject to the very worst levels of abuse. I'd like to just finish talking about self-generated content. So one of the biggest trends we've seen patterns of change over the last 3 years has been the increase in self-generated content. So about 3 years ago, we started doing an annual report on self-generated content with a grant from Microsoft, and they've continued to support this work. So we actually look at how much of the content we remove is self-generated. And by that, we mean that there's no adult physically present in the room. And just to explain what self-generated content is, this will be a child in a bedroom or a domestic setting where they have a laptop or a tablet and an internet connection and a camera on their device. And they will be unknowingly coerced and tricked into sharing videos of themselves. So they will not know the person at the other end of the camera, but that person will be filming what the child is doing, and then that film, that video, will make its way onto a child sexual abuse website. And the really shocking thing in 2019 was a third of all the content that we removed was self-generated. And 95% of the children in these videos are girls. And of them, 76% are aged 11 to 13. So we're identifying that there is a kind of national crisis around girls of that age who are in their bedrooms, who the parents may feel are very safe because they're at home, totally unaware that these children are being tricked and coerced into sharing these images of themselves. And for the girls themselves who, let's face it, age 11, are not emotionally or physically mature enough to know really what's happening, they're totally unaware of the potential impact of what they're doing. So it's very much they are victims and they need to be dealt with as victims, but we need to put in place strategies to build their resilience, for them to understand when people ask them to do certain things online, that they need to know how to say no, but also that for parents and carers to know that they aren't necessarily safe because they're in their bedrooms. I want to just finally finish with a little word about caring for our people. We have a number of analysts, so about half our staff are analysts, and what they do is they look at child sexual abuse every single day. We have to be very careful about looking after our staff. So we have a very detailed recruitment process where we go through not just the normal recruitment process, but they also have a psychological profiling, and we talk to them about their resilience and personal support mechanisms. They have mandatory monthly counselling, an annual psychological assessment. For all the staff, we have enhanced DBS. We have away days for all staff to get together, obviously pre-COVID, to ensure that we have a really effective team. We have shorter working days. We work in a really nice space with a nice outdoor environment. And we also offer them with additional counselling if they need it, and even counselling after they're moving on to a new job elsewhere. We ensure they have regular breaks and they never work overtime. There's no home working for our analysts and no alone work, because the people we work with are the most precious thing, and we need to protect them because they do an absolutely outstanding job ensuring that child sexual abuse is taken down, because every time an image is shared, that child is re-victimised, and we owe it to them to do everything we can to protect them. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello, my name is David Llewellyn. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner at Dyfed Powys. So Dyfed Powys is in Mid and West Wales. Felly, croeso mawr I chi o Gorllewin a Chanolbarth Cymru. A warm welcome to you from Mid and West Wales. I'm one of 2 Police and Crime Commissioners elected in 2016 for Plaid Cymru. And I also have the privilege of being a trustee on the board of trustees for Embrace Child Victims of Crime. So it's truly an honour for me to be in a position to contribute to these series of webinars and this conference online this week. And hearing about how the charity started and also the work of the charity on a regular basis in board meetings is important. And as a Police and Crime Commissioner, I hope that I'm in a position to support the charity, but also to support our young people. And recently, it's become a more challenging time. Many would argue, I suppose, the COVID experience has pushed us all to work digitally, hence these webinars that we're having this week, but also that comes with greater threats. So many of you, I'm sure, watching this session will be unaware of what Police and Crime Commissioners do, and very quickly I need to follow that by saying, don't worry, I'm not going to spend the next few minutes talking about the role of Police and Crime Commissioners, but I am going to give you an insight into how I feel the Police and Crime Commissioners can influence this agenda and can, in my opinion, be a very pivotal and important role in bridging the gap between partners to ensure a multi-agency approach. We can't do this alone, and the reality is, frankly, online threats in particular cannot be policed in a responsive way. We need to educate, legislate, and finally, and most importantly, safeguard the vulnerable, in particular, children. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to share some information with you, and of course, my views and opinions as an elected Police and Crime Commissioner. So I also hope to get a chance to touch upon one or two local investments. I'm going to specifically talk about adverse childhood experiences and also the work of school liaison officers in Wales as two particular aspects that we have found in Wales in particular then have had a significant impact. So striving to make the internet a safe place for all is one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. Nobody would argue with that. So much of our lives are now spent online. We all recognise the critical importance of keeping children and young people safe. Social media is so woven into our lives and aspects of our lives and our personal lives in particular. Young people no longer disaggregate very often that online activity to the offline, which is very, very challenging and brings with it some risks, really. Cybercrime is one of the fastest growing criminal activities across the world and can affect both individuals and businesses and can be very significant. Young people are particularly vulnerable to this type of crime, as a result of them using the internet so often, as I mentioned, really. They connect and comment on things, discussing things with others through social networking, emailing and online messaging, which can lead to the creation of and sharing of photographs, videos and articles, and very often that could be an issue. Smartphone ownership, as we know, has become in effect a necessity for a teenager, with I think upwards of 95% of teenagers now reporting that they have access to a smartphone. So I want to just dwell on a few figures. The NSPCC recently published a report called How Safe Are Our Children 2020, and you can see from that report the scale and the heightened risks of experiencing physical and sexual abuse of young people. So the NSPCC helpline, for example, received an average of 1,000 contacts a month between April and July from adults as well concerned about young people being physically abused. Now, that was an increase of 53% pre the lockdown average, which is very significant. If I just use the David Powys figures as an example, during 2019-20, the total number of sexual offences against under 18s was recorded as approximately 600 offences. And this is the stark figure. Of the 600 offences, 35%, over a third of those, had a digital tag or a online footprint relating to the investigation, which highlights the prevalence of online activity impacting crime and incidents. So I wanted to talk about adverse childhood experiences, and there's an increasing international body of evidence identifying the substantial negative impacts of adverse childhood experiences and how that can then manifest itself in physical and mental health in adulthood or in that transition from being a young person into adulthood, and very often leading to individuals finding themselves going through the criminal justice process and very often finding themselves being sent to prison. So Public Health Wales back in 2015 conducted a collaboration with Liverpool John Laws University, where they did a study within Wales. And they visited over 14,000 households. They had 4,000 eligible people that were approached and people that agreed to be part of a focus group and a study. And what was found was that there was a direct correlation between those adverse childhood experiences that we talk about, and that could be, dysfunctional parental relationships, domestic violence, substance misuse or alcohol abuse within the household, and all of those issues can have an adverse impact. And that led to a bid being placed into the Home Office, successful bid on behalf of all of the police commissioners in Wales, where the Home Office invested £7 million into the Early Action Together programme in Wales. And one of the critical outcomes for that, for me as the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Powys, was that we were able to transform the organisation, transform policing into a trauma-informed service, one that looks at the person in question through the lens of the child, or through the ACEs lens, the Adverse Childhood Experience lens, trying to understand what problems may be sat behind that individual manifesting themselves in that criminal behaviour. And that has truly transformed the way in which we approach and the way that we work within policing in Wales. Alongside that activity, we also have a significant investment from Welsh Government into our School Liaison programme, and the School Liaison programme is critical to ensure that officials and professionals within the education setting in Wales have access to a dedicated resource, a School Liaison officer who is an operational officer with years of experience. But also critical to that is that the young person has access to that School Liaison officer. There is a curriculum which is agreed across Wales, and there are opportunities for that curriculum to influence young people and their behaviour, ultimately working towards safeguarding those individuals. And at the heart of everything that we are doing in relation to that adverse childhood experience agenda, as well as that investment in School Liaison officers in Wales, is to ensure that we have a high level of investment in prevention to safeguard and to reduce offending and victimisation occurring in the first instance. One very quick example I'd like to share with you as well is the successful work that I did with a local theatre and education company. So we worked with a company called Hargreaves, who are based in Aberystwyth, and they devised a production that went into schools across Mid and West Wales and has been taken on now, which I'm very pleased to hear, in North Wales. And the production was called Tempted, Hido in Welsh, and it was about the situations that young people can find themselves where they may be sexually exploited or exploited online as a result of individuals cultivating information and befriending and getting involved in one-to-one interactions with young people. And it was a massive success. They were successful. I'm pleased to say they were successful in getting an Arts and Business and Young People Award here in Wales. The company Hargreaves won the main award, and our innovative project was one that got recognition through having an award itself as well. So that is an example of how police and crime commissioners can work in an innovative way, in a slightly different way to the traditional criminal justice process, commissioning services, working with the third sector, working in effect with individuals with the right skills and abilities to safeguard our communities on a regular basis. So I hope some of that activity can continue here in Wales, but can be also taken to be delivered elsewhere. Very often it is important for us to share some of this learning and share this partnership working across different agencies and areas of the UK. So hopefully you found what I've had to say interesting, and it's given you some further sort of food for thought and a bit of an insight, I suppose, into the role of police and crime commissioners and how I critically see the role of police and crime commissioners as one that can work in partnership and is key ultimately to tackling this ever-increasing problem, the online threats that we have. There is obviously a role for policing to respond, to work from an enforcement point of view and to ensure safeguarding. But there is also a role for other public sector bodies and the third sector, in particular agencies such as Embrace, a charity who have particular experiences in dealing with child victims. So I hope you found some of what I've said interesting and that you engage with these webinars and this online conference this week. Thank you very much for listening. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Hello, I'm Katie Bourne and I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your conference today. Apologies for the slightly unusual setup, but I'm sure you're hearing that from all your speakers. I'm going to refer to the slides that you hopefully have access to. And again, please forgive me for looking down at my screen, which is on my lap at the moment, but we'll do the best we can. So I wanted to introduce you and talk to you about Reboot, our programme of youth intervention work in Sussex. Moving to slide 2, what is Reboot? Well, as I said, it's an early intervention programme. I lead on it, and it was delivered initially by Sussex Police. They started a pilot in Hastings, working with about 70 young children. And the idea of the programme was to catch young children when they first came to the attention of the police for the wrong reasons, and tried to put them into better diversionary activities that were more positive, and really to prevent them from getting caught up in a life of criminality. I was successful in a bid to the Home Office back at the tail end of 2018, and we were awarded £890,000 to develop this programme out of the pilot and into a more substantial programme across the entire county. And the idea was to address serious violence in Sussex. Now, in response to concerns from Sussex residents on their fear of youth violence and antisocial behaviour, and in line with some of the findings from the government's recently released serious violence strategy, I knew it would be vital to use this funding to invest in community resources to help steer young people away from criminal lifestyles. Sussex Police had seen a 17% increase in knife crime in 2019 compared to the year before, and 25% of those offenders were under the age of 18, so these were young people. Now, due to its proximity and travel links into London, young people in Sussex are also considered vulnerable to the exploits of county lines gangs, and the South East is noted as the most at-risk region for drug-related crime and violence. So Reboot is a whole system programme. It works with lots of partners, and it recognises the breadth of needs of young people across our communities, and that they require support from a variety of services. Evidence shows that young people who experience low self-esteem, self-control, low resilience and empathy are at a much greater risk of poor life outcomes, including involvement in crime and violence. So the Reboot partnership aims to improve young people's life skills and well-being, and to develop positive relationships to avoid them experiencing these outcomes in adulthood. Reboot will, in the long term, improve the life chances of young people and make our communities safer. So if we turn to slide 3, how does it work? Well, young people are referred into Reboot when they start to display the early signs of being at risk or of becoming involved in crime and violence. These include, but they're not limited to, things like non-engagement with school, missing episodes, being part of a peer group that's coming to the attention of police, harmful risk-taking, alcohol, drug use, and aggressive or impulsive behaviour. They're highly likely to be engaging in low-level criminality and antisocial behaviour as well. And these young people are identified across a whole range of operational policing opportunities. So it might be through school liaison officers, through investigations, through neighbourhood police, our exploitation teams, or even our missing persons teams. Our PCSOs and our prevention youth officers engage with young people and their families to highlight the risk, and they endeavour to establish a relationship and offer the young person some positive diversionary activities and support. Interestingly, in the pilot in Hastings, we found that by the time a young person got to magistrate's court, that was often the first time that the parent or guardian even knew that young person was involved in criminal behaviour. So the first level of reboot is the PCSO will deliver a letter to the parent or guardian telling them that their child has come to the attention of the police for the wrong reasons. And, you know, in 80% of the cases, that's all it needs for the parent or guardian to step in and change the child's behaviour. Because despite any family, even with the most difficult of challenges, they all want to be good parents to their kids and do the right thing. Reboot is really groundbreaking because it encourages police officers to understand that young people's difficult behaviour is often a consequence of a variety of factors that are out of their control. And encourages them to see young people as fundamentally vulnerable. It also helps them to think beyond the obvious and consider the vulnerability of young victims and witnesses of serious violence, and to think about their younger siblings and their peer groups as well. It gives officers, importantly, a mechanism so they can refer that young person into the programme. Because previously, the young person would have nowhere to go. They'd be left without any intervention and inevitably on a trajectory of crime. Reboot takes the long-term view. It identifies young people before they start along that criminal path. If we move on to slide 4, here are some examples of the diversionary activities that support the services who are working as part of our Reboot partnership. So Active Sussex coordinates all the sports and physical activities on offer across the county. You've got young people accessing gym memberships. They can join sports groups such as kickboxing, dancing. And during lockdown, they've even provided an extensive online activity schedule for young people. So the programme's continued despite lockdown. Albion in the Community is an example of our localised community group. Their Premier League Kicks programme is their flagship community programme, and it uses the power of football and the appeal of the Premier League to inspire young people to achieve their potential and improve their well-being. The Sussex Liaison and Diversion service provided by the NHS is really important because it uses health and well-being assessments to ensure our young people are appropriately signposted to the right services. And getting health on board has been crucial to the success of this programme. Many of our young people are displaying mental health issues, and being able to refer them straight into services without the long wait has been really beneficial. And finally, the Army Cadets, well, they're soon to join the partnership, and they're offering young people the opportunity to take part in some quite exciting and adventurous activities, as only the Army can. And it'll give them the opportunity to make new friends, to gain some valuable skills and also some qualifications. Moving on to slide 5, the youth coaching. This shows you the coalition of community groups that offer this invaluable service. So the YMCA Downslink Group, the Hangleton and Knoll Project, which is local to Sussex, the Trust for Developing Communities, and Audio Active. So we have 9 youth coaches who work across our county and then managed centrally by the YMCA. They bring a wealth of knowledge and experience of youth work. And the coaching programme is based on a strength-based plan. So we focus on the aspirations of the young person and the positive things in their lives rather than the negative things. They're youth-led, so they make it bespoke for every individual child. But rather than focusing on the why are you doing this, you should stop doing the negative stuff. They ask the questions like, what are you good at? What do you like doing? What are you interested in? And they try and get the child into that activity. The youth coaches also make use of all the community groups and services that are known to them, because they work on the grassroots level. So there are often very small clubs locally that the youth coach will know about that probably we don't as part of the group. And they tap into those local clubs and those initiatives that are happening. And they also have access to an enabling fund, which is really important because that means that they ensure that any financial concerns don't act as a barrier for the young person to join a particular group or activity. For example, some young people said, well, we've got no trainers. So the youth coach will buy them a pair of trainers so they can access the gym. If they're doing artwork, for example, they can help buy materials for that art club and so on. Moving on to slide 6, we're nearly there. Reboot capitalises on the scientific basis for addressing the causes of serious violence. So offering, as we talked about, sports diversion to encourage young people to experience an alternative adrenaline rush, similar to the one that they get when they're doing their law-breaking behaviour or they're engaging in some high-risk-taking activities. It teaches them how they can get that same adrenaline rush through exercise. And in a similar vein, Changing Chances, who you can see on the screen, they provide workshops to the families of Reboot as well to help young people and their parents better understand how the teenage brain works and what might underlie different and challenging behaviours. They provide caregivers with practical strategies to employ with their young person and an empowerment toolkit for young people to help them recognise their own needs and emotional stress responses. And the image is of cards which illustrate needs and emotions. Each family is given a set to keep as part of the workshops. Make Good Trouble, who you will also see on this slide, well, they're a media production company and they use teenagers as co-creators of some quite groundbreaking TV, social and radio work. They encourage teens to explore attitudes and issues around mental health and emotional well-being, and they document their endeavours, covering some difficult topics like domestic abuse, alcohol, eating disorders. They created a series entitled Raising Teens in Lockdown, and they addressed issues such as anxiety and homeschooling. And the final slide. To date, our Reboot programme has engaged with over 1,000 young people in Sussex. It's far more than we ever anticipated engaging with. And our early evidence suggests really good improved outcomes for those young people and some positive feedback as well from parents and from the practitioners themselves. However, I think the benefit of the programme will really come to light in the long term. It's adapted well to COVID-19 despite all the challenges we've all faced, and the majority of the activities have continued to run, albeit online. And the programme is also embarking on some independent evaluation because we want to show that Reboot can benefit children in ways that are measurable, that are sustainable and meaningful. And we want to build on the success of the programme and, where necessary, refine it. And finally, if you look at some of the comments from the young people so far, one says, the help has been good and the gym is giving me something better to do than hanging around the town. I feel like it takes a lot of stress away, makes you feel less anxious, makes you feel energetic and really happy, and you feel accepted. And I think my particular favourite here is, I'll leave you with this one. It says, it feels good to be heard and not ignored. And isn't that so important when it comes to changing the behaviour of young people? So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting. Our Reboot scheme continues. Certainly we've got funding well into next year, and we're hoping to make it more sustainable because clearly there's a need for it. And I think we've got a programme here that would benefit many, many areas across the UK as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Lots of food for thought there. Now over to Anne to field the questions that have been asked.
Well, hello everyone. It's Anne here from Embrace. Thank you for joining us for today's sessions. It's been really insightful. And I have to say, lots of food for thought there. The questions have been coming in, and the comments, lots of praiseworthy comments for all our speakers. We're going to start off our first question, which comes from Derbyshire Constabulary, Sarah Dustin. Sarah's asking you, Susie, if you work closely with the NCA, the National Crime Agency. She's making the comment that they appear to have similar work streams to the IWF. Susie?
Yes, thank you very much, Anne, and thanks for that question. Yeah, the IWF is an independent organisation, but we work very closely with government, law enforcement and the internet industry. So we are in a very unique position because we're able to work with everyone. I guess the principal difference between what we do and the police do is that we go after the content and the police go after the bad guys. And the areas where we do overlap is on victim ID. So where we see new children, we immediately escalate that to the police, and obviously it's the police's role to take that forward. So we work very, very closely. Our key partner is CIOP. So we work closely with the referrals desk in CIOP, and if we find content hosted in the UK, we always liaise directly with CIOP to make sure that there's not an ongoing investigation before we have that content removed from the internet company. So it's a complementary and a supportive role, but we actually do quite different things.
Oh, thank you for that, Susie. Would I be right in thinking that you're also keen to work with agencies such as Embrace to get closer to the victims in the images that are being removed? You want to get to understand how the feeling is for them.
Yes,
Am I
absolutely,
correct?
Anne. I mean, you're absolutely correct, Anne. And, you know, we really admire the work of agencies like Embrace. At the end of the day, eliminate online child sexual abuse. And, you know, at the heart of every single image is a real child who's been sexually abused. So the more that we can understand what victims, the more that we can support people, and the more we can give them hope, the more we get closer to achieving our mission. So it's absolutely essential that we don't sort of work in isolation. And so we share intelligence, we share trends, we share patterns. For instance, you know, it's absolutely essential that we don't work directly with children because we don't have that expertise, which is why we need to access the expertise of Embrace and other agencies working in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots and lots of work for us both there, I think, and certainly the trend that it's younger children that are involved is quite chilling. You know, all in all, very, very worrying. Just looking at the questions coming in, we've got one for David, but I don't think David is yet on the line, and there's certainly a number of questions about for him and also Katie. So whilst is David with us yet? I don't think he is. But one general question, possibly Susie, you may have a comment on this. The questioner is saying there's been some really great outcomes from the introduction of the Early Action Together programme. My question is how, and this is from Tegan from a Welsh university, is how will the police forces continue to operate in this way once the programme finishes? Having worked for a number of police forces in the past, I know it's always very difficult when new successful initiatives come on stream, how they can work to be sustainable, and certainly something that we'd be really keen to do is to continue some work. Certainly with individual forces and also with groups and other organisations too. Susie, I don't know if you're aware of the Early Action Together programme. It's not one I'm completely familiar with, but I don't know if that's, I think the general twist here is around early intervention, and certainly we know how important that is.
So no, I'm afraid I don't know anything about the programme, so I can't comment it except to say any support and the police can have in terms of early intervention has got to be a good thing. So I don't really know enough about it, I'm afraid, to comment.
No, that's absolutely fine. we're looking at, that's another question for Katie, where can we access further information on the Reboot programme? I'm sure Katie Bourne will be very happy to share more materials on that too. I think just looking at the time, we're probably running out of time too. So just wrapping up then from me, just to say that all the questions that come in, we will answer them as far as possible. And those that have come in for the speaker panels who've been unable to connect with us today, I will forward on the email. I would just like to say a very big thank you to our sponsors for making this series of webinars possible. Our series sponsor is Slater and Gordon. We're very grateful to them and to the other sponsors who've also been very supportive in this new direction. I'd also like to thank a real big thank you to you, Susie, for your time in sharing the incredible work that the IWF does. I never cease to be amazed every time I hear you speak, either in conference or on television. It's an incredible organisation, and I thank you for being part of our event today. Also to our trustee, Daffit, who's down in Wales, for his eloquent tones and his thoughts on a really important topic. And lastly, to Katie for the Reboot. And I can see from the activity on the screen, there's a number of people that would like to hear more about that and how they can probably have a slice of Reboot in their areas. So thank you all very, very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.